Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for EarthEcho's STEMExplore Virtual Career Connection featuring Nury Molina, PhD student and Dr. Nancy Foster Scholar at NOAA and the University of California in Santa Barbara, California. My name is Casey, Programs Manager at EarthEcho International. We are joined today by one of our exceptional Youth Leadership Council members, Dimitri, and he is going to moderate today's live event. Here at EarthEcho, we're proud to work with an outstanding group of young leaders who help drive our work to empower their peers around the globe to take an active role in protecting our planet. Dimitri is from Tampa, Florida. He, along with his brother, founded their environmental protection initiative called Green Gasparilla with the goal of targeting a specific source of plastic pollution resulting from the Gasparilla Parade, which takes place each year in Tampa, Florida. So Dimitri, thank you for helping us out tonight, and take it away.
Thanks, Casey. We're so excited to have students from all over the globe joining us as we learn about exciting and sustainable careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. This live event is part of STEMexplore, EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration to life by telling the stories of dynamic female professionals in STEM careers during live virtual career connections. We want to thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their support of women in STEM. Here at EarthEcho, we believe that youth have the power to change the planet. Visit earthecho.org to learn more about our programs. You can also access resources like STEMexplore's career profile videos, as well as tune in for upcoming live events just like this one. I'd like to recognize and thank STEMexplore's partner sites around the country and recognize those joining us today. Let's get a hello from our friends with Primetime Palm Beach County at Green Acres in Florida. Hello, Green Acres. It's great to have you join us today. We also want to give a warm welcome to everybody tuning into our live streams. Just a reminder that you can send in questions for our STEM expert via chat, and we will break throughout today's presentation to see if you have any questions. Feel free to start typing questions in the chat space on YouTube or in the Zoom feed. We'll be sure to answer those as we go along. Now, let's get started. I want to welcome our special guest from EarthEcho's STEMexplore Virtual Career Connection, Nury Molina. Hello, Nury.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk with you all today.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here with us. So Nury received a BS in environmental science with a minor in conservation biology from UCLA, where she worked in Dr. Peggy Fong's lab examining the preferences of herbivorous fish species for different algal species in Moorea, French Polynesia. As a NOAA Dr. Nancy Foster Scholar, she will complement her research on coral reefs in the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa with reefs in Moorea. Her PhD research will focus on herbivorous fish and how their consumption of algae contributes to coral reef resilience. So, Nury, why don't you tell us more about what you do?
Thank you so much for the introduction. So as you mentioned, I'm a first-year PhD student at UC Santa Barbara in the Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Biology department in Dr. Darren Berkey-Powell's lab. And I get to work in beautiful coral reef ecosystems. So most of my work has been done in Moorea, French Polynesia, which is an island in the South Pacific. So on the picture on the left, we can see where Moorea is in relation to where I did my undergrad at UCLA. So it's about a 9-hour flight from Los Angeles. And as scientists, we get to work from a research station owned by UC Berkeley. And this is an amazing opportunity to meet and potentially collaborate with scientists from all over the world that come to Moorea to study their coral reefs. And the reason why I study coral reefs is because of their incredible importance. So coral reefs are home to 25% of the world's marine species, and they support millions of people, especially those living along those coastal communities. They provide food, money through fisheries, money through tourism. Coral reefs even protect the coastline by absorbing energy from storms, and they're also part of their cultural heritage. But worldwide, many reefs are declining in health rapidly, and some have even transformed from being dominated by corals, like the picture on the left, to being covered with algae, like the picture on the right. And when we lose corals, we lose the functions that they provide for wildlife and for humans. And this shift to having reefs being covered with algae is caused by things like overfishing, nutrient pollution, often from fertilizer, from agriculture, which runs off into the ocean and allows algae to overgrow and outcompete the coral. Now, usually there actually is a balance of coral and algae. So coral and algae compete with each other for space, but they're actually fish that eat algae. So by eating the algae, they create space for the corals to grow.
So, Nury, why don't you tell us a little bit more about how or what role that fish play in a coral reef ecosystem? How is it that they keep the reef healthy?
Yeah, so this is actually the focus of my PhD research. So I'm particularly interested in understanding the role that fish play in helping coral reefs resist and recover from disturbances and thus be resilient. So we can think of resilience kind of like a rubber band where it's stretched really far, but it bounces back to its original form. So coral reefs undergo stressful things like overfishing, nutrient pollution, storms, changes in water temperature causing coral bleaching. And I'm interested in looking at the role of fish and helping coral reefs being able to bounce back from those really stressful things. So my work involves me having to do experiments underwater. So this involves a lot of scuba diving. And I do this as opposed to doing most of my experiments in a lab. So while we're underwater, we have tools like a dive slate, which you can see me and my dive buddy have in these pictures, and they have pencils attached. And this allows us to take notes underwater. And this is just a really great way for us to see the interactions that are happening in a coral reef right now. But doing this type of field work can also be really challenging because we can't control nature, but it just creates for a really dynamic and exciting place to work. And these pictures are from some field work I did earlier in the summer. And that's where I started a new project looking at the role of fish after a coral bleaching event.
So you mentioned coral bleaching. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah. So healthy corals have this tiny microscopic algae that lives inside of them, and they need that to survive. But corals are also really sensitive to changes in temperature, and this can stress them out and causes them to lose that algae that they needed to survive. And when this happens, they turn to a white color, which is when we call them bleached. And when corals are bleached for too long, they can actually die. And this allows for the opportunity of other algae to grow over them. So earlier this year in Maria, French Polynesia, there was abnormally warm water. And this caused many of the corals to bleach, leaving many of them to die. So this led us to that project that I was mentioning and trying to understand the role of fish after a coral bleaching event. And in this next slide, we can see an example of a coral that's undergone coral bleaching. So we see parts of it are white, but there's also this fuzzy green-brown stuff growing over it. So this is actually a signal that the coral has died, because if it was alive, it wouldn't have allowed that algae to grow over it. So on the picture on the right, you can see I'm flagging some of these dead corals and I have numbers on them, and I put video cameras out so I can see what's happening. Are fish eating this algae that's growing over the corals? If so, what species of fish and how are they eating? And ultimately, in order to try to understand the role of fish, that fish play in helping reefs being able to recover after coral bleaching. And this is actually a snapshot of some of the video footage that I'm working on. So I can see these dead corals that have been bleached, and I can see the algae that's growing over them. And I'm also able to observe Are the fish eating this algae? Where exactly are they eating it? What species of fish are grazing on this algae? Again, so I can see over time how a reef's able to recover. And I'm planning on coming back to these sites every couple months to see how it changes over time, so I can see the process of recovery after bleaching. And I have a fellowship through NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And this fellowship is the Dr. Nancy Foster Scholarship. So I'm planning on applying the same questions I've been asking, but in a national marine sanctuary. So the US has about 13 national marine sanctuaries, most of them marine, some freshwater, and these sanctuaries work with the public, federal, and the state in conserving and researching these ecosystems while also allowing some compatible commercial and recreational activities like fishing. And this really aligns well with my interests and having my research be applied, because the sanctuary works with those local groups, so I can work with them in providing research guidance needed for management decisions. And I'm specifically planning on working in the reefs of the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa. So that's currently up to date of where I am in my graduate research.
Very cool. All right, now let's check in with our interactive sites for questions. Our friends in Green Acres, do you have any questions for Nury?
Okay. How much do you make a year?
So that's a really good question. So as a graduate student, it often depends on the school you're attending or whether you have fellowships, and it can also depend on the location you're living in. So you might get a living stipend and tuition paid. So that can range from like 20 to 30,000 a year for a graduate student. Now, depending on what career path you choose to take, because there's so many different career paths, it really depends what path you take. That's a great question.
Do we have another question?
Yeah. How much does the ship cover? Your fellowship. How much does your fellowship cover?
Great question. So the fellowship I have, it provides 30,000 in living tuition, living stipend plus tuition, and you also get funding support to do collaboration work with a NOAA facility.
Nury, I'm going to pop in here real quick. You mentioned fellowship. Could you maybe explain the difference between a fellowship and a scholarship?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. So a fellowship is, I think a way to describe it is it's more specific to your graduate studies. So a fellowship can be over several years, 3 to 4 years, depending on the fellowship. Often for these fellowships and their applications, you have to provide a research proposal because they're funding you as a student, but also the type of research you're doing. So these fellowships, like I mentioned, can provide living things, research expenses, potential internship or collaboration types of things, which make it a little bit different from a scholarship, which is often sometimes just a scholarship can be like $10,000 and they just give that to you once, but a fellowship can often be for a certain amount of years.
Very cool. Do we have any more questions?
If the size of a coral, does that affect how fast the bleaching process can kill it? Or
The size of the coral, can that affect the process of the bleaching and how fast it can die off? Was that your question?
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
Wow, that's actually a really Great question, and something actually really interesting that I would love to look into. So some of the corals that I'm planning on coming back to with these videos, I was actually able to size some of them. So I'll actually be interested in over time seeing how that might play a role in their recovery. But that's actually a really amazing question and something that hopefully I can potentially figure out.
Any more questions from Green Acres?
That's it for now.
Okay, thank you. All right, Casey, do we have any questions from the chat?
We do. Thank you. So we have a site watching us in Hawaii, and they are wondering, it's kind of a twofold question. So how did you find out about your fellowship, and what was the application process like for that?
That is a really great question. So the first time I heard about this NOAA fellowship, it was from my mentors at UCLA. So that was how I first heard about it. But NOAA actually has some really great scholarships for undergrads as well, which I wish I knew about earlier. And so I would really recommend looking into those as well, and that can really help you prepare for a graduate fellowship. So what was the second question again?
The question was, what was the application process like?
Yeah. So the application process involved writing a research proposal, and this specifically, they prioritize proposals that match with the research needs of a particular national marine sanctuary. So like I mentioned, I'm planning on working in the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa. So I did my research and to try to understand, okay, what research needs does that sanctuary need? And what experiments and projects can I come up with so I can match those needs? So the research proposal is a major part of it. There's, a typical kind of personal statement section, talk about your experiences. And part of being a Nancy Foster Scholar is that you're a National Marine Sanctuary ambassador, meaning that they want you to be involved in outreach. So part of the application process is explaining, how you're going to be involved in outreach, which I think is really important for scientists and being able to, engage the public as well. Yeah, great question. Oh, also this scholarship you can apply, or the fellowship you can apply as a senior undergrad while you're applying to grad school, or you can also apply for it as a PhD student. And also they offer it for master's students as well.
Very cool. All right, great questions, everybody. Now, Nury, could you tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are today and where you grew up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California in Oxnard, Ventura County. My parents are immigrants from El Salvador. So growing up, I didn't have a lot of opportunities to be out in nature and appreciate the natural world. But I remember experiences like in 6th grade, we had a science camp and I loved it. But it wasn't until high school in my environmental science AP class where my teacher took us out to the Channel Islands National Park. And this is a chain of islands off the coast of Ventura County. And we helped in native plant restoration. So we took out plants that didn't belong there and planted ones that do belong there. And this really ignited my passion to pursue environmental science because I wanted to learn about the natural world, but also learn how to conserve it. So the next step for me was applying to college, and being a first generation college student, so my parents didn't go to college, I didn't really have a lot of guidance or advice on how to do this. So I just want to point out that applying to college can be a time where you're having to forge your own path, but I just want to remind you to not question your worth during this time. So I got into UCLA and I majored in environmental science and minored in conservation biology. And this was the perfect combination for me because I wanted to use my science to inform conservation decisions. So in my first year at UCLA, I interned with an organization called Reef Check, and they work in research and conservation and outreach of tropical coral reefs and California kelp forest. So I would help with things like go snorkeling and collect invertebrates, bring back to a touch tank we had at the office to show kids. I would also help with outreach for Earth Day, World Ocean Day. And after this, I realized I wanted to get involved on the research side of things. So I applied to a program called a diversity project, which was run by two UCLA professors. And this program brings minority students out to Murray, French Polynesia to do coral reef research. And this program is really important because a lot of us came from backgrounds where we would have never have been able to go diving or get involved in marine science. So for a lot of us, this program really changed the course of our lives. And I remember a lot of us weren't super comfortable in the ocean at first. Two people in our group couldn't even swim. But after just 2 weeks, we had our open water diving certification and a special scientific diving certification, which is a certification you actually need to conduct research underwater. So for the next 5 to 6 weeks, we started a research project. This involved a combination of free diving and scuba diving to do our experiments. And it was a really intense couple of weeks. But after this, I realized that this is what I wanted to pursue because I saw how amazing coral reefs are, but also how vulnerable they are. So to explore my interests further in marine science, I applied to a study abroad program through UCLA called the Marine Biology Quarter. And this was in Australia. So this was another experience where I was able to conduct a research project with my peers. And again, I got to go diving in coral reefs in Australia and just seeing the diversity of life coral reefs support, but also the human communities they support. And this just further motivated me that I knew this is what I wanted to pursue. And it's ultimately why I'm doing what I'm doing in graduate school.
Very cool. All right. So what are some options for someone who would like to take the same career path as you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's so many different career options in marine biology. For me specifically, I'm just in my first year of my PhD, but I'm interested in things like working with a government agency like NOAA. But this is a list of just a few current job listings. Many people after their PhD do what's called a postdoc. So this is another 3 to 4 years of intense research. And the one I found is through NOAA. Or if you really like science, but you want to be more involved in communicating it, which is extremely important in helping science be applied, you can be a science communication specialist. Or if you want to combine science with economic solutions, you can do that. You can also be a science consultant. You can work in the Parks and Wildlife Department. You can be a director of a marine laboratory. You can work for the US State Department as an environmental program administrator, and you can be a faculty at a university. So you can do research and have a lab with grad students, or if you just want to teach, you can also be a lecturer. So this is just a really short list of the types of things you can do, but I just wanted to show there's really diverse paths you can take just in marine biology.
Yeah, those all sound like great options. So here at EarthEcho, we believe that we can act now for a sustainable future. Can you tell us how your job contributes to a sustainable future?
Yeah, so in an academic setting, we share our knowledge with scientists, but I think to really make a difference, we need to share our knowledge with the public and policymakers. And specifically for me, working in a national marine sanctuary, the sanctuary works with like local fishing groups, tourism groups, and they work with them to acknowledge their needs in order to create sustainable solutions. So those people can continue to make a living, but we can also protect these ecosystems for years to come. And my goal is to keep reefs from turning into something like in this picture where it's just covered in algae, you don't really see a diversity of marine life, or potentially reversing reefs that have turned into something like this back into a thriving coral reef ecosystem that supports a diversity of marine life, but also the humans that depend on them.
Very neat. Now let's check back in with our interactive site to see if they have any more questions. Green Acres?
What are ways that we could help the corals and the beaches just like by ourselves, just like any day?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ways as individuals that we can help coral reefs. So one of the biggest threats is climate change. So we can, sorry, what was that? Oh, sorry.
Good.
Yeah, so how we can help coral reefs is by, reducing our carbon footprint. You can do that in a lot of ways, simple ways, turning off the lights you're not using, but also things like eating less meat can actually really cut down on our greenhouse emissions. Other ways is like, now that you have this knowledge, you can share it with other people as well and see, look how important coral reefs are, and we need to cut down our greenhouse gas emissions to help them. Those are really just some of the ways you can help coral reefs. There's other threats impacting them too, like cutting down on your plastic usage. That can also really help the marine life that depends on coral reefs. It's a great question.
Do you have any more questions?
Okay. So when you went to your trip to Australia, was it covered for, or did you have to pay for it?
So just making sure I heard the question. When I went to Australia, how did I pay for
Was
it?
it covered for, or did you have to pay for it?
So through UCLA, there are many opportunities to help fund study abroad programs. So I applied for this scholarship. It was called the Wallace Scholarship for International Field and Marine Research. That helped me pay for that. But I think many schools that offer study abroad programs, there's usually some sort of scholarships that you can apply for. But that's a really great question.
Very cool. Any more questions from Green Acres?
No, that's it.
Okay. All right, Casey, do we have any questions from the chat?
We do. Somebody picked up on the fact that you mentioned, did you say your father's family or your family is from El Salvador? Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you ever get to visit El Salvador is the question. Do you still have family there?
Yeah, so I actually have a lot of family still in El Salvador, and we do go there once in a while. As a family, we sometimes go once every other year. My parents go a lot themselves. My grandmother's still over there, so we go there pretty often.
And another question I have is, do you speak any other languages?
Yes, so I also speak Spanish. So when I'm at home, I'm mostly speaking Spanish with my parents, which is also great when I'm in El Salvador, that I can interact with all my family there as well.
Excellent. And I have one more question coming in from our chat, and this might be a tough one. What is your favorite coral reef animal?
Ooh, wow, that is a really hard one. My favorite coral reef animal. One of the most exciting experiences I've had in a coral reef was seeing turtles. I just think they're so majestic, and I think I would say right now, those are one of my favorite animals that I've seen in coral reefs. They're pretty amazing.
Awesome. That's it from the chat, Dimitri.
All right, thank you, Casey. I'm going to go ahead and ask a question that I have for you, Nury. Earlier, you were talking about like science communication and how you've been using, or you mentioned about science communication and how you're trying to get your message out. And, you know, my organization, one of the things that we've done is use an underwater drone to get footage of the bottom of this channel here in Tampa, where there's a lot of plastic pollution accumulating, and it's quite a out of sight, out of mind problem that people don't really think about. But, you know, we're trying to bring awareness to it through that. What could you elaborate a little bit more on, like, what kinds of things you're doing to get the message out about your research to the general public?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's such a major component, of science is getting our message out. In the past, things I've done was we would have booths for Earth Day, talking about the work we're doing. Similarly, for World Ocean Day, the organization I was working with, we were actually having an aquarium. So it was a great way for people just at the aquarium to come by our booth and see what our organization was all about, what we were doing, and how they can help. Part of my scholarship, we have to create an outreach product. So that can be a video or an infographic, something easy where people can see like all of the facts clearly and then see what they can do about it. So there are a lot of cool ways to get the message out there.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So excellent questions, everybody. Now, to wrap things up, Nury, what advice would you give to students who want to explore who would like to explore marine science as a career?
Yeah, so some general advice I have is throughout the process of applying to college, being in college, and eventually if you want to pursue graduate school, you may have to be setting your own path, and you may feel like you look different than other people, have a different background, but I just want to say to not question your worth during this time and that you are completely qualified to be there. And something else I recommend is seeking out mentors that will point you in the right direction, because the mentors I had were really vital in getting me to where I am today. I also recommend getting involved, so volunteering and doing internships. Not only is this a great way to get experience and meet people, but it's a really good way for you to see the activities you like to do and also maybe realize the things you don't like to do, which is actually really important to know. And once in college, many institutions have some sort of undergraduate research center, and these can often have funding resources where they pay you to do research. And if you're considering applying to graduate school, they can often help with that and sometimes provide financial resources through the application process. And some other advice is if you see someone with a super cool job, I recommend just reaching out to them. Sometimes you may not always hear back, but sometimes people are really happy just to tell you their story and how they got to where they are, because no one really gets to where they are alone. You often have some sort of mentor or someone that helped you get there. And overall, just don't be afraid to try something new. If someone told me when I was in middle school or high school that I would be scuba diving and researching coral reefs, I would never have believed them. But I'm so glad I stepped out of my comfort zone and took advantage of opportunities, despite the fact that I was initially really afraid, because it really changed the course of my life.
Great advice. So one more time before we finish up, I'd just like to check in with Green Acres to see if you guys have any more questions.
Go ahead, Andrew. Yes. I don't think we have any more questions.
Oh, all right. Well, okay then. So thank you to everyone for tuning in today, and a big thank you to Nury Molina for joining us today. You can keep in touch with Nury and follow her work on social media at the links available on screen. I'd also like to thank the STEMExplore partner sites and classrooms that have tuned in live today. Great questions, everybody. EarthEcho has some exciting opportunities coming up. STEMExplore will continue to feature Women in STEM Careers with our virtual career connections in November and December. Again, visit earthecho.org to see our entire lineup and to register. Be sure to stay connected with EarthEcho on our social media channels, as well as on our website, earthecho.org. Thank you again to our wonderful STEMExplore mentor, Nury Molina, and to United Technologies for their tremendous support of our programming. On behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you for joining us and keep exploring.